I chartered an AVRO RJ100. The Avro RJ, and earlier the British Aerospace 146, are a family of regional airliners designed and built in the United Kingdom. These unique-looking planes were originally designed to serve regional markets with low operating costs, fast turnaround times, and be able to handle steep approaches and short runways, all with a minimal noise footprint. The BAE 146 flew for the first time in 1981, with three separate variants called the BAE 146-100, 200, and 300. An updated version called the Avro RJ followed in 1992, replacing the previous models with the RJ70, RJ85, and RJ100 respectively. By the end of production in 2001, a total of 387 BAE 146s and Avro RJs were built, making it the most successful British airliner program. The newer Avro RJs in particular were quite common in Europe, especially with operators like CityJet, Swiss, and Brothen's Regional Airlines. In recent years, though, as more efficient regional airliners entered the market, the number of BAE 146s and Avro RJs still flying has shrunk quite a bit. Today, the only scheduled operators of the type are somewhat hard to reach, in places like Kyrgyzstan, Iran, Bolivia, and Chile. However, there are several of the type still flying around Canada, in particular with one operator called Summit Air. Summit Air largely provides workforce transportation for natural resource companies to remote gravel strips in the Canadian Arctic. Here, 2 RJ85s and 4 RJ100s have found a second life thanks to their ability to use unpaved runways. These RJs are a common sight both in Calgary and Edmonton, and we're pretty lucky to still see these planes on a regular basis. Still, they operate charter flights only and don't do any sort of scheduled service. So, sometime last year, I got a message asking if any of Canada's RJ operators might be interested in doing an aviation enthusiast charter, and that got me thinking. The only precedent for an enthusiast charter in Canada, at least in recent memory, was back in 2019 when Air Tindy agreed to do one with their Dash 7, which I was there for. With that experience in mind, an Avro RJ enthusiast flight sounded like a pretty solid idea. Better yet, it could probably be done right from home out of Calgary, heading out over the Rocky Mountains for some nice scenery and be back in an hour's time. Of course, someone still had to be the one to organize that, so with my very limited free time these days, I thought, why not? The ball started rolling with a couple emails, which later turned into seeing the plane for myself, going inside and making sure each window seat actually had a window, figuring out how much to charge, asking around to see if people would actually be interested, picking a date, figuring out how to take payments, especially for those outside of Canada, opening reservations, collecting payments, writing up terms and conditions, getting people to sign those, sending out flight confirmations, keeping track of everybody, filling out the manifest, assigning seats, triple checking that everybody's details are accurate, and praying for good weather. This was much more effort than just booking a flight like a normal person, but I knew it would all be worth it for a bunch of us to be able to fly on one of these rare planes. Eventually, the day finally came, Saturday, May 3rd, 2025, and the weather was perfect. Summit Air's flights typically use the Sunwest Aviation FBO, located on the northwest corner of Calgary International Airport. It's a very nice facility, with this huge lobby, lots of seats, and complimentary beverages and snacks. Sunwest Aviation also has a large private and charter operation of their own, which they've showcased here really nicely. For now though, all we had to do here was check in with our photo ID and get our boarding passes for today's flight, which were provided by Sunwest. Obviously, none of us would have any checked baggage, so once that was done, it was off to the departure lounge where you could see our plane being towed over. The star of today is this 1999-built British Aerospace Avro RJ100, registered as Charlie Golf Zulu Romeo Juliet. As part of organizing this, I made sure each of us would have some time to get some proper airside photos of the plane, so I'll tell you about its history in a bit. Pretty soon, all 59 of us were there eagerly awaiting our turn to hop on board the RJ. Before that though, our crew for today came out to introduce themselves and said a few words.
Yeah, we're happy to take you guys out for a rip in the RJ today. So what we're going to do is I guess we're going to run you guys out in small groups so everybody can have pictures and questions, anything you want to take with the airplane, by all means have at her. We were thinking, due to the nature of the flight being I guess aviation enthusiast at this point and then sightseeing once we get airborne. So we're not going to do like a real in-flight service. There's swag bags and water bottles on all your assigned seats.
Including safety feature cards?
Including a safety feature card. last night I was thinking, I wonder how many safety briefing cards are gonna go missing.
After that great introduction, the first 10 people went out to get their fill of the RJ before hopping on board and letting the next group go. I stayed back until the last group went, and soon it was my turn to get some beauty shots of the RJ in this morning light. This RJ100 was first delivered to Crossair of Switzerland in October 1999. It was then transferred to Swiss in 2002, and continued to fly for Swiss until 2017 under various regional subsidiaries. That summer, it then flew across the Atlantic to Summerside, Prince Edward Island. There, it, presumably, underwent maintenance with a company called Tronos Aviation, an MRO that specializes in BAE 146s and Avro RJs. In January 2018, it was officially delivered to Summit Air, and became the fourth RJ to join their fleet after 2 RJ85s and another RJ100. Summit now flies a grand total of 6 Avro RJs, in addition to 2 others that are stored in Edmonton. This was such a great opportunity to see some of the RJ's unique details up close, like those washing machine-sized engines, which also don't have thrust reversers to keep maintenance costs down. Instead, in addition to robust wheel brakes, there's a large air brake at the very back of the plane, which the crew kindly opened for us upon request. There's also the gravel deflector on the nose landing gear, the most obvious aspect of the Avro RJ gravel kit. Now, the only problem with having 59 aviation enthusiasts on board is that all of this took a bit longer than expected, and we were now about half an hour past the original departure time. Not that anybody would be complaining about getting some more time on the plane. This was the only flight for the plane and our crew today, so they were, fortunately, very flexible. My seat for the start of this flight would be 1F, in the bulkhead row. This first row on the RJ has some extra space, but most importantly, a great view of those 2 engines out the window. As promised, there were indeed gift bags waiting at every seat, which was such a nice touch. I'll go through those a bit later. I also planned on trading seats halfway through the flight, so I can show you some more of the cabin. For now, enjoy the departure from YYC.
If not, and here we go. Once again, a warm good morning on behalf of Summit Air. I hope you know how excited and honored we are to have you on board this Avro RJ100 series aircraft. The main can be used in airplane mode, but check with a flight attendant before using any other portable electronic device. And remember, if your device falls in the seat, do not move the seat or try to retrieve it yourself. Notify the flight attendants immediately. Now, in preparation for departure, I direct your attention to Aviation
de cet avion, Avro RJ. Vous attachez votre ceinture de sécurité, insérez la languette métallique dans la personnel lors d'une évacuation. En temps de vol, s'il y a un changement de pression dans la cabine.
Flight captain here, we were just going to launch off runway 35 right, and they popped the runway change on us, so we will now depart off runway 17 left, so it'll be a right turn out to the rocks. Sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. Once we get this buggy going a little bit, we'll get some cooler air for you, and it should get a lot more comfortable here in a hurry.
Our routing today first took us westbound past downtown Calgary, then almost parallel to the Trans-Canada Highway, before turning northwest just south of Canmore and Banff. This gave us some great views of the city as we headed towards the Rockies, passing Springbank Airport and Ghost Lake. At 14,000 feet, we were much lower than you'd normally be on a commercial flight going to the west coast, and the eastern slopes did not disappoint. Soon we were passing over Canmore, visible just below, with Highway 1 running right through it. There was an occasional cloud around this point as we made that turn to the northwest, but, this combination of wing view with that scenery really could not get any better. Next up, you can see the town of Banff just below us, as well as Sulphur Mountain, where the Banff Gondola goes to, plus Banff Airport and Lake Minnewanka in the distance. So far though, the weather had been pretty much perfect, that is, until around Lake Louise. Checking the weather that morning, there was a cold front moving in from the west, bringing in a nice wall of clouds and precipitation. Our original plan was to continue up to Natpee, an IFR waypoint about 50 kilometers northwest of Golden, BC, before turning around. Instead, our crew opted to head south towards Invermere, where we did a figure eight to get some turning shots on both sides of the plane before heading back towards Calgary. At that same moment, as we turned south, I switched seats to get a different angle in row 9. Still being able to see the backs of both engines was super cool, and the views did not stop this entire time. In the normal seats on the RJ100, the legroom is actually very impressive. There's a standard adjustable tray table with 2 indents for cups, a roomy seat back pocket with a safety card for the RJ85 and RJ100, and an unbranded air sickness bag. Speaking of safety cards, inside that goodie bag, Summit really went the extra mile. Each of us got a bottle of water, a Summit Air lanyard, pen, fridge magnet, pin, and our own mint condition Avro RJ safety card. That was a very specific request I made, and I'm super thankful Summit came through with those. The interior of the RJ100 has a ton of little quirks as well, like the lowered ceiling halfway through the cabin, which, yes, I did hit my head on, and the smaller overhead bins in those rows too. There's also the window shades, which are actually 2 shades that meet in the middle. This RJ100 seats 100 passengers with 17 rows total in a 3-3 configuration. The 17th row in the very back, however, only has 4 seats in a 2-2 layout instead. The 146s and RJs could also be configured with a 3-2 layout, having slightly wider seats at the expense of reduced legroom to keep the total number of seats similar. For context, these planes have a cabin width of 3.42 meters, ever so slightly more narrow than a 737, which is 3.53 meters. Some of Summit's other RJs do have that 2 and 3 layout, but they're not usually based in Calgary. The nice thing about the 3-3 layout on this one was that the seats were spaced far enough apart that every single window seat did indeed have a window. These planes also have 2 galleys and 2 lavatories in both the front and the back. Up front, the RJ's flight deck is also much larger than a typical plane of this size. Our crew was extra accommodating of nearly everybody wanting to take a look both before and after the flight, and it was greatly appreciated by all of us. These days especially, it is super cool to see an airliner flight deck design that's not just Boeing or Airbus, plus the super panoramic view out those big windows. Speaking of windows, it's about time we return to those Rocky Mountain views outside, and I think I'll let them speak for themselves. Enjoy this little montage as we make our way back towards Calgary. All too soon, we were back over the foothills and on the arrival into YYC. Here's us flying over the city again and landing onto runway 17 left.
Hello everybody, again, that's the pointy end people. Hey, I'm just going to pull the air brake full on so you people can feel what it, experience what it feels like. Here we go, the air brake's in, and air brake's fully extended now.
Hi, it's Emmett, and how cool and how fun was that? Welcome back to Calgary. Just a few housekeeping rules. Double check your seat pockets and your general seating area. Make sure you left nothing behind. Once the main cabin doors open, I'll speak with the pilots to see if there's extra time to do a few more pictures for those who didn't get a chance to get some on the flight deck. But on behalf of Captain Oli, First Officer Michelle, Andrew and myself, Emmett, it was an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on board. We are truly grateful to take you to the peak of your Avro RJ experience with Summit Air. An extra shout out goes to Alex. He's back there. Alex, we are so truly grateful that you've selected Summit Air, and we hope that we'll have the opportunity to do this again very soon. So
again, Alex!
Tomorrow! Let's get the bill first!
So once again, Alex, thank you all, and thank you. It was lovely meeting you all from all over the world, and please keep in touch, and please remember Summit Air, and please share your experience. I'm sure we're very excited to have met you all, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Do we get miles for this?
So that was what it was like to charter an airplane. Honestly, the RJs have always been one of my favorite planes to see, and the fact that we actually successfully chartered one is kind of insane. I want to say an enormous thank you to everybody who came out for this, even those who weren't able to make it. It honestly made me so happy to see how excited people were about the plane and the entire experience, and it made these last couple months of work all worth it. I also want to extend a huge thank you to SunWest and the entire Summit Air team, especially to our crew today and to Jamie in charters for putting up with me for the last several months. He and everybody else behind the scenes well and truly went above and beyond for this, and I'm very, very grateful. So, I think this was worth all the effort, and there's a good chance I might put together some more flights like this with some other aircraft types. For now though, I'll just say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.